But then
For sure.
I download it. I'm like, WTF? It's not working. And has anyone here heard of the book Clean Code? Anyone? I don't know. I don't know how everyone handles it, but you could raise your hand if you've heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, you need to read it. But one of the things that he has is he measures his frustration level in what the fucks per minute. And so if my WTFs per minute goes up, and there's a threshold, then there's a really big problem. And you have to measure things in WTFs per minute. So if you hear
I
a
like
developer,
it.
what the fuck, yeah, and you hear it a lot, then there's a significant issue and you need to address it.
Fair enough. Absolutely. All right.
I
Well,
love
it's 9.
WTF per minute, measurement.
That's a fantastic metric. I'm gonna have to remember that one. It's 9:07. I think everybody who's probably going to show has probably showed. So I'll go ahead and introduce you, even though we've been chatting the entire time. This is Arie Rahimzadeh, everybody. This is one of my favorite workshops that we do, because if you're a developer, you're going to spend time debugging. It's just a flat out fact. And acquiring the skills to be able to do effective troubleshooting is paramount to your success. And this guy's awesome at it. So you probably already figured it out that Arie is a developer / architect / engineer, teacher, an author, clearly a public speaker too. I think that's pretty clear just from our chat this morning. I think you also either co-founded or are running as a president some number of engineering meetups. I'm not sure if you still are, at least you were.
Yeah,
And
Indie.NET Consortium and Indie Xamarin. Yep.
yeah,
And IT Nerd Happy Hour.
Perfect. I want to join that. And also, just a fun little tidbit of information, he was also the former director of consulting for a consulting agency that was affiliated with 1150 Academy once upon a time. So he's already familiar with our academy, and he's a big supporter of our mission. So I'm going to stop talking and just turn it over to you, Arie.
Yay! Awesome. Thanks, Pete. I think you're heading out. You got to run.
I am, and the thing is I'm not a Zoom expert. I've started the recording, but I'm not sure. Yeah, that's what I'll do right now. I'll make you host.
I think you already did.
Yeah, you already are.
Or something. I don't know.
Yep.
All right, so we'll see how well this works, because there's so many different apps out there for sharing your screen now. Okay, cool. So everyone can see themselves, so I will remove that. Yay, multiple monitors. Awesome. Can you see that, Pete?
Yep, I sure can.
Okay, so if you can see it, everyone should be able to see it. Great. Well, thank you for introducing me, Pete. Pete's a great guy. And today, my name's Arie Rahimzadeh. He already introduced me. Let me see if I can make this all work. I'm the director of software engineering at Klipsch. I don't know if anyone's heard of Klipsch, but we're an audio company here based out of Indianapolis. We're multinational, and just make great speakers and sound bars and headphones and earphones. And something that I get to work with every day is the hardware, firmware, and software integration. But I've been doing this software engineering for a long time. But I'll tell you, what an interesting set of circumstances that you run into when you deal with stuff that can't change easily, like hardware. And firmware, in case anyone's wondering, like, what the heck is firmware? Where does that fit into hardware and software? And I think you could look at it as that's the software that runs on the hardware. So they call that firmware. So there you go. If you're ever wondering, I think it's just software, but okay, whatever. It's a whole field. So today we're going to talk about debugging. And you're all learning to be software engineers. I'm not sure how far along everybody is on this particular call. And actually, I'm going to see if I can expand my view here. Let's see if I can do this so that I can see if you all raise your hands. Not that you have to right now, but code is the easy part. And when you're at a coding school, I think you're learning the foundation. You're learning the fundamentals, and that's great. You have to do that. Once you learn one language, you'll find that as you learn additional languages, they're all effectively the same. I mean, it's just sets of instructions, and the computer follows them. But the code is the easy part, and then for any number of reasons, it breaks. And that's where debugging comes in. And if you can debug effectively and you can plan effectively, and we'll go over that, that's going to make you valuable in the workplace. Anyone can code, but being a good debugger / troubleshooter, problem solver, and your ability to plan so that you don't have to run into these issues, those are what are going to separate you from everybody else that codes. And if you want, you could look at code. And by the way, I'm not someone to read from slides, but I will occasionally. And just to set the stage here, if you have any questions, I'll leave the chat window open so I can see chats come through. And then, oh, thanks, coolest t-shirt ever. Sweet, thank you. I gotta arrange everything on my ultra wide screen over here, and then I can read what everybody's saying. Oh, cool. Pete said, "Have fun, everyone." So, by the way, I love this shirt. Yeah, the what is it? Ninja cat riding a laser. I think it's a laser wolf. Very fun. So code is English. It's just like learning a language. But just because you know a language doesn't really mean that you can communicate effectively. Writing a book is debugging and planning. So yeah, you can write code, sure, but to be effective, you have to be able to plan that code, and then if something goes wrong, you have to be able to fix the bugs in it, fix the grammatical errors of sorts. We're going to talk about a couple items. One is just thoughts about debugging skills and how to help things go right. So the keys, like I said, are planning and debugging. You want to get to the point where you avoid the bugs in the first place. You don't want to just assume. You can assume there will eventually be bugs, but you want to plan ahead of time. And then if something does go wrong, you want to be able to debug that effectively. And we'll go over how to do that. So effective planning and effective debugging. And then part 2 is really just a free for all. What do you want to talk about? What kind of questions do you have? That doesn't mean that you should hold your questions until we get to part 2. I'll keep my eye on the chat over on the right. And if you ever have a question about the slide that we're on, or a topic that we're covering, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and I will definitely be watching for that. So there's a few types of bugs out there, and it's important to know when you should fix bugs, because when you end up getting your first job as a software engineer, you're probably going to be a junior developer. And they know you're a junior developer, so don't freak out that you're going into your first job and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm such an imposter. All these people are better than me. Stop that. Stop the fear and doubting yourself. It's okay to fail in software engineering because that's part of our job. Failure is part of our job. So put that aside and just accept that you are a software engineer now. And you not only have to create things that never existed, you have to fix the things that never existed. So you will probably end up seeing a backlog of bugs. And who knows how stale the backlog is, but there's going to be high priority bugs and lower priority bugs. But priorities shift all the time. The key is you must be able to respond with urgency based on how important those issues are. Not every issue is a bug. It could be a new feature, and it could be a combination of a bug and a feature. But you need to be able to respond with urgency. So number one is an immediate fix or critical priority. So any sort of bug that costs the company money or customers will end up being the most urgent, immediate fix, critical priority bug. It doesn't matter what the issue tracking system says. It doesn't matter if it says it's low priority. If it costs money or it costs customers, eventually someone's going to get whiff of it and they're going to bring it up to they're going to just say, this must be fixed immediately. In that case, if it's at the wrong priority, fix it in your issue tracking system so it matches your process. Process is super important. And then go fix it. And I did see the question come through, Melanie. I'll answer that in a moment. Highest priority is if you don't have something where the vice president or director or whatever isn't breathing down your neck to get something done because, hey, we look like crap because there's a bug out there, then you go highest priority. Yeah. And usually you're going to be working in sprints. At least I hope you are. If not, that's okay. Eventually your company may get to them. But the key is that you get things done in a reasonable amount of time. A sprint just kind of frames that for you. So work on highest priority. Then anything under highest priority is as you get to them. So you may have medium and low priority issues of it, that you could work on. I think whatever time is available, if you don't have any highest priority items, if you could pluck address the low hanging fruit, even if it's a lower priority, if there's like 7 low priority tickets and 1 medium priority, I would take, and if the 7 are easy to get, like if they're easy to fix versus the medium priority item, take the 7 medium or low priority ones and just get them done, because now you've taken 7 bugs out of the backlog, which overall is less work for the team to do. And take the medium priority, like the larger task that is, even though it's higher priority, move it to the next sprint or talk with the team about when should we address it. Just because it's lower priority doesn't mean you shouldn't tackle it. If you can clear out the backlog with easy wins, take the easy wins. You're making the system more stable and you're saving everybody time. And, from a perception standpoint, management sees that the number of bugs went down by 7 instead of 1. So perception is a thing. Whether you like it or not, perception is a thing. We'll go over some example tickets here because sometimes tickets suck. Oftentimes they do. But yeah, sometimes, there's an acceptable issue until everyone starts being affected by it. So, just expect that your priorities will shift sometimes often. Let's see. Melanie had a question. Do you think a computer science degree is worth it? She received a scholarship, but she doesn't know if it's worth it to further her career. I think any degree is generally worth it because a degree is a rubric. They know that you went through a certified program, and so there's certain things at the end of a computer science that you probably know if you have a computer science degree. Just like the 1150 where you're at right now, there's certain things that all employers who hire 1150 graduates know they probably are familiar with, knowledgeable in, etc. But that doesn't mean that you're good. Anyone can get the degree. It's one of my favorite quotes I heard from a friend of mine actually was, what do they call the worst doctor who graduated medical school? It's doctor. They don't say Dr. Smith, got all A's. It's just Dr. Smith. So Simply having the degree, simply graduating from coding school, that doesn't necessarily make you good. I think and that doesn't mean that I'm saying everybody sucks. No, the key is how you apply yourself and how you take that knowledge and expand it. I would hire someone who doesn't have a college degree, but has 4 years of experience, or someone who only has a college degree and all they did was spend, I don't know, 80 minutes a week, or 120 minutes a week in classes and took the same tests and quizzes and had the same homework as everybody else for 4 years. So sure, they got all A's, but they have no additional experience that compared to anybody else who also did the bare minimum. I mean, bare minimum is kind of unfair, but if you did the what it took just to get an A, but you never really took it on as a career, like, wow, I'm interested in this. I'm going to go to meetups. I'm going to network. I'm going to learn about the technology I'm interested in. Well, then what differentiates you? Your college degree? Everybody has the college degree. So how are you better? And I don't think anyone gives a shit about your GPA. I mean, maybe if you say I had a GPA of 4.4, whatever they are these days, okay, great. But you have no work experience. I mean, even an internship or a co-op puts you, 50% plus ahead of the rest of the field for the people who simply have the degree. So experience will translate to job opportunities. And maybe even more importantly is if you took the effort to go to meetups and start networking, that's where you're going to get your first job. Your degree isn't going to get you your first job you really want. I mean, it might. I mean, I'm not saying, only a Sith deals in absolutes. But the key is if you go and meet up with a whole bunch of people in the industry that you want to start your career in, they already know your value because they see you, they've conversed with you, they've talked with you, maybe not as a fellow associate, fellow employee on the team, a fellow teammate, but at least socially you've had conversations about the same industry that you're in. There's a level of trust that already exists there, so that will help you tremendously as you move up. I mean, like I'm director of software engineering. I didn't go apply to be director of software engineering. A friend brought me into Klipsch saying, I got an opportunity that really would be right up your alley. And I'm like, and he described it to me. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a lot of fun, because I started out as a solutions architect there. And then I became director of software engineering. But I mean, I didn't go apply for a solutions architect job. I run a meetup and we all talk, and that's where the opportunity came up. Is we've all been in meetups for many years, and so we know each other's capabilities. Yes, I've spoken. Yes, I've written books. Yes, there's all that stuff. But it's oftentimes who you know that different opportunities will be presented to you. Let's see. My husband is a senior developer and he thinks the same, that college didn't really matter, specifically A's. Yeah, definitely, Melanie. Yeah, that doesn't mean that college doesn't matter. If you have experience and you have a college degree and you're going to meetups, I mean, come on. I mean, the odds are stacked in your favor at that point. Now all you just have to do is, they got to think you're a good member of the team. You'd make a good fit. I've referred people to various companies, and I'll get off this topic in a moment. But I've referred people at various companies and really good developers that I think are phenomenal, and I would absolutely hire. It's not like you have unlimited budget, right? And they don't get the job. And I asked why, and they're like, well, we didn't think they'd be a cultural fit. I'm like, WTF? I mean, what do you mean? I mean, they're going to do a great job. So, companies, especially on the engineering side, I think sometimes they're just, you know, they're funky. So, you know, when you're looking for a gig, I think if the people that you're talking to there like you, and they already know you're a known quantity, and you come highly recommended from people internally, then you'll get past all that stuff, all the cultural compatibility and everything stuff. Not that I think it's bullshit, but you know, sometimes it is, sometimes it's an excuse. So, you know, definitely get networking, get networking under your belt, whether you have a college degree or not. Okay. So like I said, there's a few different types of bugs. And there's, you know, or typical tickets. And usually when something goes wrong or there's a new feature, there's a ticket put into it, an issue management system such as Jira or Azure DevOps, or insert name of something else here, you know, like fog bugs or whatever. But typically, highly technical people are not giving the bug report, and even highly technical people often suck at bugs, you know, because they turn into users. And you get something like this: the app doesn't work. When I try to connect my device, it gives me an error. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they'll tell you what kind of device they're on. I'm on an iPhone. So in the comments, you know, what don't we know here? Or if you want to, you know, unmute your mic, you know, what don't we know here? Although it's usually easier to just write it into the comments because everybody just ends up talking over each other when you got like 25 people. Yeah, what type of error? What else don't we know? Yeah, what part of the app isn't doing what it's supposed to do? So how did you get to what you're dealing with? What version of iOS are you using? Yeah. What is the error, right? Yeah, we don't know if the user did something they shouldn't have. True. So what are the reproduction steps? How did you get to the point of getting to the error? I mean, did you launch the app and immediately gave you an error that you won't tell us what it is? Did you take a screenshot of it? You know, we're developers, but unfortunately, I think people think that it's just simple. It's if someone says the app crashed, the app doesn't work, that we know everything about like why the app would ever crash, and that there's only one way it ever would. So how do we help things go right? I mean, let me see. Yeah, what was the specific error message? This is one that people like, they love to leave that out. What was the specific error message? You got an error, but you know, okay, so the app doesn't work. Like, let's pull this apart. You know, the app doesn't work. Well, how doesn't work? How doesn't it work? What was the expected result? And what was the actual result? I mean, app doesn't work, doesn't help anyone. Go to your car dealer, say, my car isn't running right, and leave it at that. And they're either going to be like, okay, we'll take a look at it. You'll get a bill for a few $1,000s because they did a whole bunch of diagnostics. Or you could have told them what they, you know, or they'll query you and go, well, what do you mean your car doesn't work? Doesn't matter that if it's software or a car or whatever, you know, it's the same issues apply. It's, you know, troubleshooting. Yeah. When I try to connect my device, it gives me an error. Well, what do you mean by connect your device? It's always okay to ask. If there's not enough information, it's always okay to ask. And we'll get into that. Yeah. But you got to communicate in software engineering. It gives me an error. Whoa, what is the error? Does it go away? Do you have a screenshot? Do you have a video recording? I mean, like on an iPhone, you can bring up the QuickTime player. And if your iPhone is plugged into the computer, you can use the iPhone screen as a source. It'll let you record it. Android, like if you got a Samsung phone, there's built-in screen recording. It works great. You can even narrate it. It's very cool. Even in Windows, you can, I think it's Windows G, you can start recording the screen, because it's game mode. So, I'm on iPhone. Well, what iPhone? What version of iOS? Come on, you got to help me help you. So those are things we don't know. Now, atypically, you will get clear details, the repro steps, the operating system, the screenshots, the expected result versus the actual result. Those things you'll get. Rarely, but you'll get it. A clear definition of done. Like, how do I know I've solved this problem? So is there more to the error? And if it's like a feature request, did they give me mock-ups? Did they give me all the assets? So like, did they give me what this is supposed to look like, or is it just up to my interpretation of what it should look like? Because the worst thing you could do is have a picture in your head of how something's supposed to look and then tell me to go build it. And if I don't check with you and I go build the thing and it takes maybe a day or it takes 2 weeks, I give it to you and you go, that's not what I wanted. Whose fault is it? And it's not necessarily 100% their fault, and it's not 100% my fault. The blame is often shared in a conflict. So they didn't give me enough detail. I never asked any clarifying questions. And what about assets? For example, like I have a mock-up, and they want a product photo shown. Well, do I just go grab a product photo off the web? Yeah. Or is there a particular image you want me to use, or fonts you want me to use, etc.? Give me everything I need to solve your problem. So we have minimal communication, because even though communication is great, if you don't give me enough information in the beginning, it's going to take a lot longer to get the job done. And everyone's going to be frustrated, because it's not like the person who gave you the thing to do isn't busy, and it's not like you're not busy. So anything you have to do to take time out to go get more information and wait, the more frustrated everyone becomes, because now the deliverable is delayed. Whether it's a bug or it's a feature, if people won't give you all the information up front, time to resolution just goes up. It's fact of anything, fact of life. It doesn't matter what it is. People don't give you enough information to do something. It takes longer to complete. Now, everything I'm talking about here, if you notice where your team is making these mistakes of not providing enough information, not communicating clearly, etc., you should work with your team to fix the process. And if you do that, everyone benefits. It's up to you to work with your team and recognize deficiencies in your team. That doesn't mean that, and I think this is difficult, especially like if you're a junior developer, well, why should I be suggesting any improvements? And yeah, you're going to have to understand, what the landscape is and have some situational awareness. But at the same time, you should help your team get better. And if you see room for improvement, especially in like your sprint reviews or product reviews, etc., you should feel comfortable in voicing your concerns, opinions, in ways we could all improve. And if the company frowns upon that, you might be at the wrong company. So here's an example of an atypical ticket. So this is obviously something I wrote up, but this was for a product. I'm like, hey, this product of ours has a lot of amazing capability, but here's why I'm bringing this up as something that we need to do. So I'm giving you context, saying, here's, before you read anything else, this is the gist of why we're doing this. because as the developer, sometimes you don't have in your head what, you know, the person writing it up really what their intentions are. So anything I can do to get us on the same page, I'm going to do it. And then I give a definition of done with a whole breakdown, you know, of what the flow is and a mock-up. It doesn't take me that long to build one of those. I mean, maybe a couple hours, but it saves me, you know, weeks of explaining stuff to people. And here's what the screen flow will be. Here's how you're going to add this into the, you know, in our case, the app. No interpretation, not, you know, oh, you know, you'll know where to put this because you're the developer and you're smart. Yeah, of course you're smart. Yay. But that doesn't mean that you know what my intentions are. So I'm gonna spell it out. And like I was saying before, it's okay to ask. Don't sit there spinning. Communicate. Communicate with your team, communicate with product owners, get the information that you need before you even start working on code, before you start troubleshooting the problem. Get as much, you know, ask yourself, and we're going to get into this, some common questions that you can ask yourself, and that before you even touch code, you rule out certain things. And anything that you don't know, that you feel you need to know, you need to communicate. And sometimes there's, you know, people say, well, you could over communicate. True, but you'll figure that out. You know, you'll be able to feel that out on your team. So let's go over when a bug does occur. Yeah. Oh, first I'll go over what was in good ticket detail, but we'll get into bugs in just a moment. I should remember all my different slides. So a few items that would be useful in any ticket. Number one, clear description. Like, don't just tell me it doesn't work. Repro steps. How did you get to the issue that you're encountering? Don't just tell me it happens. Tell me how it happens. Does it happen all the time? Does it happen at certain times of the day? Does it only happen if, you know, you're in dark mode versus whatever? Yeah. Does it only happen on certain operating systems? Does it only happen when you have no internet connectivity? I mean, come on. You know, you got to give me these details. Screenshots, like when it's happening, like a single screenshot could tell me a ton of things. I mean, let me take a look at my phone here. You know, just as an example, like, you know, when my phone is running. Let me see if I can bring this up. Boop, boop. There we go. Let's see if I can find it. Where's my phone? Oh, okay, here. Where'd my phone go? That's great. It's there, but I don't know where the okay, I'll close it. It's weird. It's there, but it's not there. Oh, it was weird. Okay, well, let's see if I can get this to come up again. Oh, I see. Apparently Zoom likes to stay on top of everything. All right, there. Okay, so. All right, so just looking at a screen, I can tell right here that there's internet connectivity. The battery's at 100%. I can tell what time of the day it was. I can see, you know, a bunch of things, like they have an alarm that may be set. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me see. Thanks for letting me know you can't see my phone screen. Wait, I might have stopped sharing accidentally. Let me stop my share and share again. Share my screen. Screen one. Share. Hopefully this works. Okay. Now can you see my screen? And of course that makes the chat go away.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sometimes I hate Zoom. It's just like things just like randomly like break. And I don't know why. Like I was sharing my screen and I was sharing the full screen, but then I bring my screen up and then, oh, whatever. So anyway, here you can see, I know what the battery level is. I know that they have cellular network connections or connection. I know they have a wireless network connection. I know Bluetooth is enabled simply by looking at the top of the screen. I know the time of day. I know where they are. I mean, this is a lot of information that would help me as a developer. That one screenshot helps me rule things out. I could even look at this and realize they're on a generally newer version of a phone and Android because there's no physical buttons. And that's an Android 9 Plus thing. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things I can figure out simply by looking at a single screenshot. So give screenshots. So getting back to the presentation, what was the environment, the time of day? What was the expected result versus the actual result? Oftentimes people say it doesn't work because they were expecting something. Pull that info out of them. Interview your user. Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck there just spinning. Get these typical items that are right here. Ask those up front. If they didn't provide them to you, ask it up front. Like if it's not an obvious fix, like, oh, I know where that is. Ask for all of these items first, and then have them come back to you with it. Because if it's not obvious, you're going to be drudging through the code. Yeah. And it may be something out of your control that is like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, knowing that. So keep that in mind. And you could start looking into the issue even while you're waiting for this information. But the key is to get them in the practice of providing these kinds of details. I've actually sent tickets back and said, I won't work on it until you give me these details. I won't. Well, aren't you a developer? Yep. And I have 10 other items I need to work on. And all you're telling me is this doesn't work. Well, I can hop on a call with you. No, give me all this information. I have other work to do. Hopping on a phone call, unless it's an urgent priority ticket, like we were talking about before, I have other things I have to get done. Get me this information. If I have more questions, I'll let you know. But without this, I can't solve your problem. Love you, mean it. So no matter how good the ticket, though, there's still a chance for bugs. And you got to be smart about this. You know, when you have all the detail, even then, you can run into issues. So you got to be smart about this. And can everyone see my screen? I just need like one yes. Now I'm paranoid that no one can see my screen. Like in Microsoft Teams, it puts like a red outline on your screen to tell you that it's being shared. And I don't see that anywhere with Zoom. So like you never know. All right, cool. So here's a checklist for easy bugs. Number 1, what changed? If nothing changed, it's probably not your code. For example, the Google Play example I was giving before. I built the app, or I downloaded the app from our build server. I tested it locally. It worked great, passed all of our tests. I uploaded to Google Play, downloaded it from Google Play after it was published, and this one feature doesn't work anymore. I have changed no code. So is it a code issue? That's where you have to ask yourself, what changed? So that's where we looked at logs, and I'm like, oh wait, Google handles our signing key. Oh, that might be related. Because the only thing that changed in between upload, when I tested it, I uploaded it to Google Play, is the signing key was different. It got re-signed, and now that's what we're solving. It was not a code issue. Look in if the code did change, look in source control. What changed? Would any of those changes have caused the issue that you're seeing? The first thing is not bring up the development environment and start looking through code. See if you can cross off the easy, obvious options. Another item on what changed. If the code hasn't changed at all, did a service that your code relies on or that your application or software relies on change? For example, yeah, we'll get into that one. So if nothing seems to have changed, let's ask common knowledge. Check with your team, because as you get onto larger and larger projects, they are more complex. They have multiple domains, like areas of responsibility inside of the application. I'm not talking about like web domains. Ask your team, hey, this doesn't seem obvious, but there's an error and it's in our authentication system. And I know like the 2 developers that have been working on authentication. Well, before I start troubleshooting, if they have a couple minutes, I could ask them, hey, you have any idea? It looks like we have an issue in our auth system. You have any idea why this might be happening? And you may immediately get, oh yeah, that would happen if they're on a wireless network at a coffee shop and they haven't accepted the terms for using the coffee shop's internet connection, so it just keeps on redirecting the app to a proxy page where all the user would have to do is open up a web browser on their device and accept the terms for using the free Wi-Fi, and then all the internet connectivity would work. And they're like, oh, right, okay. But a user doesn't know any of that stuff. They generally don't know about proxies and why web services do and don't work, and that the call would be blocked. But the auth people may be like, oh yeah, we've heard of this before. Yeah, this is why. And that could turn into a ticket that maybe you need to detect that sort of thing and prompt the user, hey, it looks like you need to go connect to the, it looks like you might be behind a proxy. But note that there's no code changes being made and we're 2 bullets down. Read the logs. That's the other super important one. What do the logs tell you? If you have logs, look at the logs, especially from the time that they ran into the issue. Remember, we were looking at that screenshot and it said at 9-something o'clock in the morning. Well, okay, let's go look at the logs from the time they were running into any issues. Did something happen? Was a system down? Do we even see their requests to our server? Who knows? But look at the logs. And we'll get into some tools that make this a lot easier. And then, again, before you even touch any code, ask yourself, especially if nothing changed, is it our fault? So if you rely on, say, Google's search service, and their API, their web service API is down, or was down at the time the bug was reported, it's not your fault. Why are you spending any time looking at code? Now, you might be, it may be an opportunity to create a ticket in the system that if a service is down, you send a notification somewhere, or you let the user know it looks like we can't communicate with something, so they don't just get like an empty screen or whatever. But it might not be your fault, and you have to be willing to accept that. I think, you know, sometimes in software, we're taught everything is a code issue. And that may be, but it's not always an issue with your code. And so you have to rule out that it's actually that it's actually not a vendor's fault as part of your easy checklist. Another example, is it your fault? Did an expected payload change? So if you're relying on services that are external to you, did they add unexpected data or change the data that they send you in some way? And your logs should be able to tell you that. And if your logs don't log those kinds of issues, plug the holes in your logs. And we'll get into that as well. But so what changed? Figure that out. Common knowledge, ask your team, tribal knowledge will help. That's why you have a team. You can solve issues together. Read the logs, and then is it even your fault in the first place? Before you modify any code or bring up the development environment, if it's not up, cross these things off your list. Any questions? As we're about an hour in, any questions about what I've discussed so far? Okay. So, how do you fix bugs? How do you track them down? How do you understand? How do you be an effective developer? Well, you need to know your tools. So I'm going to ask a few questions. Raise your hands if you know what they are. One, who here knows what a breakpoint is? Just use the little raise hand feature on. There we go. Okay, that'll help. It's interesting watching all of that work. Okay. Got it. So keep in mind, I'm a .NET developer, but none of these are specific to .NET, or generally they're not specific to .NET. So it looks like maybe a fifth of you know what a breakpoint is. So a breakpoint is a stopping area in your code that you put in. So while you're debugging your code, you put a breakpoint on a particular execution line, and then program execution pauses at that point. Let me see here. Boop, 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 boop. I brought up. Can everyone see Visual Studio? I think just one person can see it. Okay, cool. So a breakpoint would be like, hey, I know that an exception occurs over here. I mean, obviously this one will throw an exception, right? But I can put a breakpoint right here. And when I run the application, which I haven't run it once today, so it might take a moment to compile, but it should go relatively quick. You'll see it's running the application, but then it'll pause on a particular line. So my application's paused, and I'm on function 2. So now I could step into, so there's step into and step out. I could step into this and see, okay, I'm calling function 2. I passed it some value of 42, and I can step in and then Actually, I have some software here that tells me if there a crash is about to occur. We'll get into those things. But if I hit F10 to step over it, you'll see an exception occurred. But now I can see how it happened because I started a breakpoint. So I may want to set a breakpoint here so that anytime an exception occurs, I want to know how I got there. So if I hit continue, it'll hit it, yeah. And I can run it, continue running, and then it'll stop running.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It looks like you've got some kind of extension or something that's probably specific to debugging that's not just in the normal standard Visual Studio Code. What is it that you're using that's because I know when I debug it, mine doesn't look that way. Either that or I'm yeah.
So I have a couple different items. We'll get into them. One's called Ozcode. It's not free. And then there's RevDebug, which is free. I also have ReSharper. So you can kind of see these. ReSharper and Ozcode. Actually, I don't have RevDebug installed right now. But Ozcode is a very cool tool. We'll get into that one a little bit. But the key is like now I can be like, oh, there's an exception there. I can put a breakpoint there instead and hit start and run my application. I'm like, anytime I hit this breakpoint, I want to know what happened. And you see, it runs it and immediately pauses execution right here. And I can learn a lot of things. And we'll get into these in a little bit about what all this stuff means. So while that's running, okay, so hopefully that explained breakpoints a bit. That'll work in JavaScript, in Java, in C#. It doesn't matter. Every programming language has breakpoints. It's a standard staple of debugging. The next one that's very important is stack traces. So who here knows what a stack trace is? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. So a stack trace is the execution path it took to get to the point that you're at. It's the stack. The application stack has a stack of calls that were made. So you may start at a main, like an entry function, and then call function 1, and then function 2 and function 3. That's your call stack. If you come back from function 3, you end up at function 2, and then function 2 may return to function 1. So your call stack in that case would look like main and then function 1. So hopefully that explains that. So let's take a look at that. So here we're at an exception that's been caught, because exception handling is a good thing to do. And I can take a look by hovering over E. Oh, I think I can. I know I can. There we go. The exception happened in my application. Here's my message. There's no inner exception, meaning it's not an exception that was thrown from another exception. So you can do inner exceptions and kind of keep on putting them inside so you can kind of see the whole chain of how all the errors occurred. But you'll notice this guy right here, this stack trace. Super important. Let's take a look at him. And it says it happened on line 9. So line 16, or pardon me, where am I here? Yeah, function 3. And I'm in function 2 right now. So the error occurred in function 3, and it was called from function 2. So this is the stack trace. So I'm handling it over here somewhere, but this is where it was thrown. So the exception was thrown from the top of the stack, and it kept dropping down until something either handled it or the application crashed. Because if you have no exception handling, the extension bubbles up the stack, even though it's kind of like falling down in this example. It bubbles up until it's caught. And if nothing catches it, that's when you get your crash. That's when the application just dies. So that's what a stack trace is. Super useful in finding out where something occurred. So learn about stack traces. And then, of course, I just handle it and I exit. All right, now. Nope. Visual Studio is going nice and slow. This always happens when I'm sharing my screen. I have to wait for everything to calm down. Oh, there we go. Boop, boop, boop. Come on. There we go. Nice. All right. Now, any questions about stack traces or breakpoints up to this point? Feel free to unmute your mic if you have any questions. Okay.
I was going to ask, the stack traces, is that what we see usually on the regular Visual Studio at the bottom, where like if you put error list, it kind of like lists all the errors? Is that the same?
No. So the error list here is really compilation errors, not runtime errors. So error list is, I tried building the application and I couldn't build it. Therefore, I can't run. And here's the list of errors that are preventing me from building it. During execution, and I'll show you, that's a good question. Not that any question is bad. Let's say I put a breakpoint on that exception. If you look on the bottom during debugging, there's a call stack, which is the same as, like, it's almost the same as the stack trace. And it'll tell you how you got to the line that you're at right now. So main called function 1, which called function 2. And you're at a breakpoint. So like if I double click this, it'll bring me to the original call and show me the data that's in it. So this is your call stack. When it crashes, you'll get the stack trace. But during execution, you'll get the call stack, which is, how did you call this function? How did you get here? And how is it unwinding?
Thank you.
And again, this is common across practically every language and runtime environment, because you're always sending commands in a sequence. Okay, so let's assume, oh, let's see if I can get there. Let's assume I didn't have any breakpoints. And my application runs. It runs. It didn't crash. It just runs through. So I could say, you know, just to make this a little easier. Wow, it's going nice and slow. Awesome. Come on. So I just gotta put some text around this and basically have it say press enter to continue. So this application will run. It'll say it's starting the run. It'll call function 1, which will call function 2, which will call function 3. Oh, hold on a sec. I comment this out because that's a bad example. Okay. So my application ran, starting run, done, press enter to continue. Did I have any errors in my app when it ran? Someone tell me, yes or no? I mean, it ran, it didn't crash. Did I have any exceptions or errors during the run?
No.
Okay, we have a no. Do we have any yeses? Look at the code. Right here, an exception was thrown. But the application didn't crash. So did the application run flawlessly? It did.
That's a trick question.
Well, it's a little bit of a trick question. And here's what it sounds unfair, but here's something you'll see all over the place is you'll see things that look like this. Empty catch statements. This is called swallowing the exception. So something happened in my application. If it happened, I'll never know about it. Because if it dies, I just want to get past it and move on. But that's bad. We don't want to just simply catch exceptions and not handle them in any way. We should at least log that they occurred. Because why is an exception happening? I mean, it's in the name, right? Exception. It's not, the application isn't running as expected. There was an exception to the normal operations. So it's good to be able to catch these issues because they may be altering the data that gets returned. Like maybe the database didn't return certain data, but they just swallowed the exception. And now you have an object that comes back or data that comes back that isn't fully there. Like we couldn't read from our order management system. So when we got the order data back, it was missing all the items that were in the order. But there's no errors on the website. But people are experiencing that when they go and review the list of items that were in their order, there's nothing listed. That's because an exception was probably swallowed and no one did anything about it. No one logged it, nothing. It's lazy. So how do you catch those? Because you can't set a breakpoint, on every exception that might occur in your application. You just can't. It's not realistic. So in Visual Studio, I'm gonna bring this up for Visual Studio specifically. If you go to your debug menu and you go to Windows and you go to exception settings, it'll bring up the exception settings menu or dialog, whatever, panel. And you can say, you know what? Anytime something goes wrong, I want you to stop execution. Anytime. This will only affect debugging. It won't affect it in the cloud or wherever you deploy it, in your app or in your users' environments. This is just for you as a developer. If you hit start now, if you run the application now, and an exception occurs, it will stop execution right where the exception occurs. And yes, you'll end up, it'll accept that it's caught over here and swallowed. But you can see that an exception is occurring. And this is an incredibly useful tool because oftentimes, or maybe I should say sometimes, the swallowed exception is what's causing all your issues. But because you just assume that nothing's gone wrong because you're not seeing any errors while you're debugging, you're ignoring the fact that people might be swallowing exceptions. Like you may not have access to a database, but someone might be wrapping the connection to the database in a try statement and simply ignoring when they can't connect. So the error that you're getting may not be the actual error or the cause of the issue that you're having. So here you can see I am catching the exception now. And this is that Oscode function I was telling you about, or the plugin I was talking about earlier. It gives you a tabbed interface, a really nice UI. You can say go to where the exception was thrown versus go to where it was handled. It's very cool. And so it'll give you a whole tabbed interface of like all the exceptions that led up to that point. It's really powerful, but it's not cheap. You know, it's like $180 a year. Anyway, now I can continue knowing that this application error is occurring. Now, you may not want this on all the time. It'll get really annoying because sometimes exception handling is, oftentimes exception handling, try catch is okay. I mean, sometimes things go wrong and you can handle it in your catch statement. That's okay. So how do you get back to the sort of checked version of it? That's what this solid box means. Because you don't want to just checked or not checked. So you can just say restore defaults and it'll restore the defaults to it, which is usually good enough. So if you're not seeing the error, go use that exception settings and just break on everything and see if you can find the error that way. All right. So sometimes the issue is with a web service. So has everyone here used, how many people are here are JavaScript developers? So go ahead and raise your hand. That'll give me an idea of who I'm working with. All right, we have 2-ish, 3, 4. Okay. And then how many of you, go ahead and lower your hand. How many of you are .NET developers? .NET, C#. Okay, so a number of you are .NET developers. No matter what, you can go ahead and lower your hand. No matter what, you're probably going to have to deal with web services at some point in your career, where you're dealing with an external system. And how do you know when an issue is occurring in a web interface or a web service? This is where these web tools come in handy. So if you take a look, if you bring up your developer tools like in Chrome, you can actually just reload, just by it's F12 is how you access them. You can actually take a look at the network tab and you can see all the requests that were made. So if you're working on like a website, you can see all these 200s. 200 means okay. This is blocked. But you might get like 500 errors. Like maybe we'll go to, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe my own website might even have some issues. Who knows? Look at that. It's all great. And you can take a look and see, like if there was a web service call. Ooh, wow, everything's going nice, and there's so many different things going on here. App shell, it's all very cool stuff. You can look at data that's coming back. So this is all JSON data. You can debug it. So remember when I was saying, hey, what if the payload changed? You could look at these things and see what data was sent back and then debug it. So that's all in the Google Developer Tools. This is Edge Developer, same thing. There's also Postman and Fiddler. Postman lets you construct web service calls and debug them. And then Fiddler will also show you, it's a HTTP proxy. So, we could do a whole class on web debugging, but the key items that you should learn about here are these status codes. So you see all these 200s. If you're not sure what these are, so 200 is okay. How many people here have heard of status codes, HTTP status codes? Okay. Good. So maybe about half of you. So if you're not sure what they are, you're going to see these. You're going to like the most common ones are like 200, 201, 400, 401, 404. We all know 404. And if you're not sure what they are, there's a really fun site you can go to. You just go to http.cat and like here's what 200 is. So it'll tell you, I mean, you could of course Wikipedia it, but these are fun. I mean, I really like looking at this. So like when there's a server error, you'll usually get a 500. Or if you're not authorized, you'll get a 401 usually. And I've actually been to one of these. This is in Japan. It's a Family Mart. A 404. Very common, right? Sometimes you'll get a 201, which is created. So, as you deal with more things with REST, R-E-S-T, you'll learn about these, what these codes are. These are super important to learn about. What is it? Is it 418 is the teapot? This was just a joke one. Ended up becoming a real status code by accident. Yeah, there's so many different ones out there. It's I just love looking at these things. These are always fun. Like forbidden. The 400s are a lot of fun. Usually it'll be like, hey, I sent the wrong payload to a web service, and you'll get a bad request. These are a lot of fun to debug. So if you're not sure what they are, you should definitely learn about these status codes. Now, there are testing frameworks out there. So unit test, test-driven development. You'll hear the common phrasing of arrange, act, assert, which is arrange your test. So set everything up, perform the action, and then assert whether you got expected results. Arrange, act, assert. It's the same across almost every testing framework. Arrange, act, assert. Each of these could be a topic in and of itself, but definitely things to learn about. At the very top, though, really understand how to use your tools to debug these issues and how to get the tools you need to debug the issues. If you're a web developer and you don't have Fiddler or Postman, go get it. Now, there is software that you can get that will make your experience better. One is Ozcode, which I was showing you, and then RevDebug. That one's free. Ozcode, not free. RevDebug, free. And it won't give you all the Ozcode capabilities, but it'll give you some of them. And Cool thing about RevDebug, it'll actually let you play back your entire application run. Now, these are all Visual Studio stuff. This is all .NET development. But these aren't, like JUnit and Jasmine. These aren't .NET specific. These are common across pretty much everything. In VS Code, if you haven't learned how to wire up debugging, go learn how. Because what you should not be doing is just adding like logging, where you just write to the console in your JavaScript app, because you're just launching the page and then seeing if it breaks and looking at your log. You're wasting a lot of time doing that, and you're losing a lot of detail. Learn to debug in your tools. Another one is like Application Insights or App Center, or even Firebase does this. This is Telemetry and Analytics. So give you an example. Here's App Center. App Center is super cool. You can just add it to your app. So sometimes what you don't see, like sometimes you don't see what your users are seeing. So how do you know that they're running into issues? Well, services like App Center, like for mobile apps, or Application Insights for just web apps or just general applications, and Firebase does this too. They can track telemetry and diagnostic data. So give me an example. I can go take a look at, let's see, Fisher's tests on iOS. This is the COVID testing app that I wrote for the city of Fishers. So they test people every single day and check to see if they have COVID. So it'll give me analytics. So I can see, how it was used. Everyone's on version 1. The number of active users over time. I can see the events that are occurring. So I can see, what my trends are. And I can even go to diagnostics. You can see I've had 0 issues, which that's awesome. In the last 30 days, I haven't had a single crash and I haven't had a single error. And they test hundreds of people a day, maybe hundreds or thousands a week. That is awesome. But, what about, let's say, in the last 90 days? I had 1 crash. So I can actually dive in here and see Singapore. This might have just been me testing something. But I can see a background thread crashed. It affected 1 user on iPhone XR. And this was probably me, because I have an iPhone XR and I know they're not using iPhone XRs over there. So this is probably me testing. But I can see the report. I can see it's the iPhone XR. I can click it, look at events. I can see I started up the app and then the app crashed. But look at this. I can see the time, the country, the device, the network they were on, when it crashed, what language was used on the device, the OS version. All of this I'm getting for free. So this is huge for me to be able to debug. So if there's an issue occurring in the field, I could see it before my users even complain to us about it. And I could see a spike occur and then take the details, give them to the development team and go look at this error. Very useful. And this is all free. Like, this stuff's just free. I got a driving hours app. Let's see if that thing's been crashing at all. In diagnostics. Nope, no crashes there. Maybe that's in the last 90 days. Maybe the Android version crashed or something. I don't know. Let's see. Driving hours. It's making me feel good not seeing crashes. So here I can see some crashes. So I'm going to take a look at the crashes. Which devices were affected. And here you go, there's a stack trace. So it died here. So the app started, see, iInvocable, iRunnable invoker, run. All right, we did all this stuff and then it died here. So let me look at my reports. I can see what it crashed on and when. Get the stack trace. They're on the T-Mobile network. And I can see they added an entry in the app and then the app crashed. So I can track how it happened. And this is all free. So FYI, you can really help things go right simply by doing that. Any questions so far? Okay. So if I give you additional advice, number one is be proactive. Stop the bugs before they happen. Like I was saying before, when you go to a coding school or you go to college or you're in high school and you learn about code, they teach you to code. But your parents have a lot of value. They have a valid argument to say, you know what, keep your mouth shut before you know what you need to say. And you need to plan first. Don't write code first. Plan first. Then you'll spend less time debugging. And I have this poster. It's in my garage right now. But imagine the person who will maintain your code is a psychopathic killer who knows where you live. Write it properly. Plan ahead. Measure twice, cut once. These are all good things to think about. A lot of schools teach you to just start writing code. 1150 to some extent does it. Your colleges definitely do it because their job is to get you to pass the class, which is write code. Because the language is, they're teaching you a language and really fundamentals. Writing code isn't bad, but writing code unnecessarily is. And writing code before you know what you're supposed to be building is like writing a book before you know what you're writing about. So plan ahead. And remember, you're not the person who's going to have to maintain your code for all time. So just remember that the next person to maintain your code could be a psychopath and they know where you live, or at least they know where your desk is. So number one, plan ahead. Don't write code first. That's the easiest part of development is code. Everyone can write code. You can write code. The person, if we were all in person, the person sitting next to you can write code. You can all write code. No one's disputing that fact. But if you have a plan around what you're about to code, you're going to deal with bugs ahead of time. You're going to weed that out because you will know what you need to build and you'll know the end result. Also, code with intent. If you haven't seen it, I've got a little article, or not an article, a YouTube video called Real World Developer Dependency Injection. The key is code with intent. Write out the interfaces first. Don't write the code. Just have the function names. Like I'm building a contact management application. I don't care how it works. I know that I'm going to have to add a content or add a contact, update a contact, remove a contact, list the contacts, sort the contacts, but like the implementation doesn't matter. But I could write interfaces that deal with that and maybe return fake data that have no code that actually does anything. just so I can see, okay, you know, if I just did like the bare minimum, do I find that I need other things? And that helps. If you have complex business rules, comment them. If there's a reason to comment something, comment it. You're gonna run into people who are so anti-comment. I think that's bullshit. And you know, those are the people that think that they want to maintain the code forever. But I'll tell you, they're gonna go see their code 6 or 12 months down the line and not know why the hell they did what they did. And it's a complex system with business rules, etc. Decisions were made, and they never put any details in the code. They just assumed everybody knew why this was implemented this way. That's stupid. And they'll argue, well, comments go stale. Okay, so the comment's stale because you're lazy and never update it? And it's your fault if you're not maintaining your code. Code changes over time. So if you are working in code and there's a comment and it's no longer valid, it's your job as a developer to update or remove the comment. It's not somebody else's problem. So maintaining code does not mean you only maintain code. You maintain the whole system. So I can't stand developers that say comments are stupid. You should just make readable code. I'm like, no, because there's context sometimes that you have to put in the code. This is why this was done this way. Like the person who didn't get the joke, is it because you didn't frame it right? No, that person might not have any of the context that makes it funny. Now, I don't know what EFA covers here, but definitely write unit tests and integration tests. I'll put a link to my friend Sasha's site. Let me see if oh, what was that? Okay, here. I mean, obviously don't read this right now, but here's the link to this. And it goes over what the difference is between unit tests, integration tests, and so forth. It's a great article. I love it. And I think it'll really help in understanding what these different types of tests are. So definitely check that out when you have time. Now, when you've written code, you should seek pull requests, PRs. Never just check code into the master branch. You should be gating that, meaning no one should be allowed to check in code to the master branch or main branch, whatever you want to call it, when they haven't had a code review. If there's more than one person on your team, anything that goes into the branch that may end up being the release should be approved by someone else on the team. And ideally, someone who's familiar with that part of the system. It doesn't have to be a technical team lead, but it should be somebody else. And you should seek PRs as well to review PRs yourself, meaning you should look at other people's code because you'll learn from each other and you'll get better at writing code by looking at each other's code. You'll gel as a team, and you don't have to be nice. I mean, you shouldn't be a dick, but you should be, upfront that if something doesn't look right in the code, or like, hey, why didn't you do it this way? It looks like we could get a crash if we did, like if this particular situation occurred. And more often than not, your coworker or team member will go, you know what? I never thought about that. And they'll go update the code. As the developer, you are too close to your code to fully review it. Because in your head, you know how it should work. Someone who doesn't know your code at all is going to look at it more objectively. It doesn't mean that you messed up. A lot of pull requests, get accepted. But yeah, sometimes you miss things, and that's what your team is there for. And there's nothing worse, I think, than a team that has pull requests where, oh, we just got to get this in, and they don't review it, and they just accept the pull request and let it go. I have seen that more often than not, or more often than I'd like to see, and it's infuriating, because what's the point of a pull request if no one reviews it? It doesn't matter how important it is. There could be an obvious bug that could delete data, but because there was an urgency to push it, they just let it through. That's stupid. So get into PRs. If you don't have them, do them. You'll love them once you start doing them. Getting back to logs, if you don't see the issue in the log and you have a gap, meaning you should have been logging the issue, but you didn't, fill that gap, plug that hole, because the logs will save you a lot of time. But you need to maintain them and you need to improve them. Sometimes it takes time to add logging. You can add it over time, but you still have to do it. If there's missed test cases, same rule. If you have missed test cases, add the test cases. Prune the old test cases. Like if you have test cases that no longer matter or inaccurate, you should prune or update them. But if you realize that there's a gap in your testing, you should fill the gap. That's all. Help things go right. If you can automate your testing in any way, that's a good thing, because computers can test software a lot faster than humans. And humans are expensive. Computers do a lot of work for nothing, effectively. And then, of course, like what I showed you before, is use telemetry and analytics, like App Insights, App Center, Firebase. It's a head-up display of your system stability. I can see, like over at Klipsch, there's thousands and thousands of users using our software. And I've seen bugs that our developers never saw, because when they were debugging, they never saw the issue. That doesn't mean that no one in the field has any issues because the developers didn't see it. So I monitor to see if we have spikes, especially after a release, that affect our users. And then I grab the stack trace, I grab the event log, I have a link to the error, I put it in a ticket, and I go, this is affecting some percentage of our users, go fix it. It's high priority. Like if it's affecting a lot of users, go fix it. And they're like, yep, okay, yeah, this is an issue. It's only an issue in these particular circumstances. But you know what? If that affects 1% of your users, that's a lot of users. And they're unhappy with their product, because they'll look at this, they'll look at your software and they'll conflate it with your product. And they're not one and the same. But perception is everything. The customer does not give a shit about the quality of your code. You could be the most amazing software engineer in the world and write the cleanest, most beautiful code. The moment it doesn't work on your user's device, it's a piece of shit and it doesn't matter, because they're not technical. So you have to do everything you can to make sure that you code defensively, your app doesn't crash, and sometimes you won't know when your app crashes, and that's where this telemetry and diagnostics and analytics comes into play. I actually already went through some of these scenarios because I was going through the debugging section or section. Cool. So that's part one. Any questions so far? And you can just unmute if you have any questions, because we've gone over a lot in an hour and 40 minutes. Okay, so let's do this. Why don't we take a bio break on the campfire discussion? Might be a good idea. We've all had coffee. And then if there's any questions, we can talk about them. I'm not sure there are any questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to bring up during the campfire discussion? Or have you learned everything you feel you're going to learn today?
I have a few questions.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's take a like a 5-minute bio break, and then I'll come back and we'll answer questions, and you can be as candid as you like, and then we'll do that. Sound good? So see you at about 10:45-ish. Yay. I can stop sharing my screen now. Yay. All right, I'm back. Hopefully everyone else is too. Great. So what questions did everyone have? Let's have a little fireside chat about debugging, and if you have career questions or whatever you want to talk about, let's talk about it.
Well, my question is, we are all, most of us at least, are in boot camp right now. We're never coded before. Some of us are very little experience. So we're learning all this information. And now it's like, oh, debugging. And so how do we get good at debugging when we're just like, what is, oh, this is, just learning the basics, but also kind of integrating debug. How do we do that? How do we just naturally become good? Oh, is there a thing we should be working on, a book we should be reading? How do we do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's like I was saying, know your tools. So I think practice will make perfect. I don't know if you'll ever be perfect at it. No one probably is, but learn those tools, use breakpoints, use your stack trace, understand reading logs, solve bugs. Like if there's a crash in a program, maybe what you can do, like if one of your teammates has a crash and you have a crash, maybe you swap them. Try solving the problem in someone else's code. But learn to use the tools. I mean, it's kind of like a craftsman without, if you're a carpenter without a hammer, your job's going to be hard. But at some point you weren't good at, hammering nails. At some point you weren't, good at measure twice, cut once. You'll get better over time, but you have to know your tools, have the right tape measures, the right levels, etc. The same thing goes with code. You're a craftsman. You're a software craftsman. So definitely, practice your craftsmanship, and you'll get that simply through experience.
And so if you're sitting in front of your computer and you come into a code that's crashed, or you like you said, sometimes you can't even see the error list, it's working perfectly. What do you do? What is your approach? Okay, I have a problem now. Like if there was the perfect steps to take when trying to solve.
I think it depends. Like I said, there's that kind of cheat list. What changed? What what does my team say? Is there something outside of my control that's the issue or could be the issue? Those are all valid things, to ask yourself, like, what is it that I don't know? Have people given me enough information to know what's wrong? If it's, my mom calling, my computer's not working, it's giving me an error message. I'm like, I don't know what that is. Or my kid calls me and says, hey, my phone, it seems slow. I didn't realize that I know every phone out there. Yeah. Yeah. So how do I solve your problem? I don't have enough information to solve your problem. Well, aren't you director of software engineering at Klipsch? Yeah. That doesn't mean that I know everybody's soundbar. So if you have a problem like say your Sony soundbar, I might have an idea as to why the issue could be occurring. Yeah, but I need more info, need input, you know, if you've ever seen the movie Short Circuit. Yeah, Melanie, I mean, that's a valid concern, but I think sometimes you just got to go and throw yourself out there and say, hey, I have a question, answer my question. If you're on a good team, I think, yeah, race and religion and all those things shouldn't matter. I mean, the human nature is what it is. I can't really answer that. But you know, if you're on a good team, I find that engineering is a a great equalizer, because as long as you're smart, other smart people will want to work with you. I, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm white, but I'm Jewish. Yeah. But you know, I find engineering tends to be, you know, it responding to your question, as a Hispanic woman, I'm a bit afraid of discrimination being out there. Yeah, I wouldn't let that stop you from going and finding a career that you love. That's, you know, to be fair, you know, not that it's unfair, or not that it's harder or not harder out there. You know, I think you can still get in your own way. So go chase your dreams. If you like software engineering, go chase software engineering. You'll find the right team. Yeah, Robert, did you have a question, or were you just raising your hand?
Yeah. So since we're all, like Beatrice said, coming from no background in this, and we're learning the fundamentals and going to be trying to get into the industry, what do you recommend for us trying to get into our first like junior developer role, and like what we can do to either be like a better candidate or just be more successful at getting that job and doing well in that role?
The more experience you have, the better. I mean, experience. If you say that you're on like a few different projects, you know, you've debugged. You know, you've solved problems. You know, like, you know, that experience is going to speak to your higher ability. Higher ability meaning HIRE. Yeah. I think the worst thing you could do is only do the work that's in the course, because that's not making you any better. You're just following instructions, and that's not the only thing you need to do as a software engineer. You need to get in there and just be like, okay, I got to solve a problem. You know, you got to be a problem solver, and if you get yourself more and more into that, I think you can speak to that during the interview, that you like problem solving. So I have found that to be good. Like if someone comes to me and says, I like solving problems, that is a big one to me. I'm like, cool. You know, like you're not afraid of failure. And maybe you are, but you know, we could help you with that. But if all you do is like, if all you want to do is write software that's green field development, you know, meaning like something from scratch, it'll be hard, you know, but knowing your goals is important, you know, if you're hiring somebody. But if you want to make yourself stand out, yeah, your resume is one thing, but no one's really going to read past the first page. So if you can show that you've done a lot of work, and even more so, you go to meetups and you just already know who's hiring because they'll tell you during the meetup. That's how you'll get jobs. Now, to add to that, I think I've heard from a lot of, you know, like junior software engineers, people starting out in the industry. Well, what if I'm not good enough? And that's a fair question to ask, but all the people that you're going to go work for, you know, like if you're going to take like a apprenticeship position or an internship, or you're going to take a junior level, they know that you're wet behind the ears. They know it already. So maybe to some extent you have something to prove, but they already know where you stand in the stack of, the experience, or in the experience stack. You're probably down here, and you're either going to move up, you're either going to go nowhere, which I doubt, or you're going to move up to intermediate and be happy. Like I could fix bugs all day and get paid well doing it. Or you're going to go up and you're going to hit, senior engineer or architect level, like if you really want to go, that high up, or you'll go from here or here and branch out to management. But my point being, they already know what your skill level is to some extent coming in. So don't freak out looking for a job going, I don't know that I can do this. Now, if your gut 100% tells you that there's no way you could do it, it's a language, a technology you don't know, you'd be the only developer. Okay, that's tough. But I don't think you're going to put yourself in those situations, because you'll look at it and be like, I am not interested at all in what this position is. Or you'll find something that you like, but it might, especially in the beginning, probably not going to be perfect, but plenty of junior engineer jobs out there.
Awesome, thank you.
What are some projects I'd like to see in an applicant's portfolio? I'd like to see their own projects. Tell me a project you worked on that you're passionate about and explain that to me. Because if you'll get passionate about your projects and you can explain them to me, then you may be passionate about the company's projects. But if all it was schoolwork, like if you liked your schoolwork, not that the classwork at EFA is bad, but it's like, I really liked working on this one project at 1150. We got to work with databases. I am fascinated by databases. It is so much fun. And so here's some features that I added because I went deeper than what the material requested. And here's how I did it. Here's what I learned. Here's where I want to get better. If you show that kind of passion, I think you're going to get hired. But if you just go, here's my resume, and you leave it at that, I have a link to my portfolio. I mean, come on, if someone did that to you, put yourself in the other person's shoes, put yourself in the hiring manager's, or whoever's shoes, and say, hey, what would they expect? Or how would I react in this situation? Let's see what my dog's doing. Oh, hold on one moment. I gotta let my dog out real quick. he's making the I gotta go out sound. I'll be right back. Think of other questions though. And I'm back. Yay. Any other questions? Yeah, Alexandra.
So you had mentioned like coding defensively. And I know that it depends on whatever you are creating or what you're coding for, but has there ever been any like common things or kind of staples that you feel like you would always want to add to code to prevent breaks, or like something?
Yeah. One moment. One item would be proactively log. Like I know there's a lot going on in what I'm writing. So I'm going to proactively log what's going on so that if I run into issues, I can read the logs and deal with it later. So that's important because when you run into an actual issue, you're going to wish there were logs. But since you only wrote the code, you don't really have a way to diagnose easily. So add the logging then when it's cheap and easy than when there's a problem in the field. Number one. Number two, if you think there's ways that you could help things go right, like massaging data, rather than expecting everything to come to you perfectly, you could see why, sometimes I might get, I don't know, like, let's say you're trying to write some code that is only visible to people in Indiana. and people who wrote IN, in their profile. Well, if you just say, in JavaScript, let's say, or whatever the language is, you just do a comparison to capital IN. You're missing anyone who put lowercase in, a capital I, a lowercase n, people who put in and then a space, or a space and then in, because like the field lit up and they press space to make the little highlight to go away, and they put in. That perfect comparison of in actually was a terrible comparison, because it's only for the people who wrote it the way that you expect them to. So think about, how would the user use the system? Think about the user at all times. Yeah, maybe one of the best things to do is, how would my mom use this? Because my mom could break anything if I gave her access to it. If she can't break it, chances are no one else is. But how would the user use that software? If you take it in that context, and just assume that users sometimes just do stupid things, I think it gives you a better perspective, and you'll write better code. Any other questions? Go ahead, Nathan.
All right. So just to kind of piggyback a little bit off Robert and Melanie's questions, for getting an entry level development job, is C# enough? Would you really recommend learning other languages? Because I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about it being inclusive to Microsoft. And I've considered colleges, but do they actually teach you any programming skills, or is it just soft skills that you learn there? Because like the school that around me, they only have computer engineering, not software engineering.
I think the soft skills you just have to get good at over time. I mean, people can teach you soft skills, but you have to be willing to accept how to work with other people. And sometimes, soft skills, I think they're a good thing to have, but you're not always going to have to interface with users. I mean, oftentimes you won't as the engineer, but you have to interact with all the other people in your office. So you got to learn soft skills. Programming languages that you should know. I mean, if you know C#, you're probably going to be working with mobile applications, or probably working on like backend or web applications. So I would also learn at least the fundamentals of JavaScript. It's a good language to know. I mean, .NET is a very good framework, and there's a lot of .NET jobs out there.
Okay.
But
sorry.
JavaScript is available. It's used everywhere. I mean, everyone uses JavaScript. So at least having a cursory understanding of it is good. And so once you learn C#, I think you can pick up JavaScript, because the fundamentals are very close. And it's fun. JavaScript. I think debugging JavaScript sucks, but I don't live in JavaScript every day. Yeah. But I know people who, they were .NET developers, and they totally switched over to JavaScript because they had to, because their job required it. And now they like JavaScript. I don't know if they love JavaScript, but they like it. And they haven't touched .NET since, or very little.
Okay.
So,
Do you have any learning platforms that you would recommend for doing that?
I think Pluralsight, Microsoft Learn. So if you go to Microsoft University, Microsoft Virtual University, it's free. So just go to learn.microsoft.com. It might also just be microsoft.com/learn. They have entire tracks that will walk you through it, and they don't cost you anything. LinkedIn Learning, I think like Codecademy. I don't know if it's Code. I think it's Codecademy, not Code Academy. And then of course, even books like Teach Yourself JavaScript in 24 Hours will give you the fundamentals. But really, just doing it is going to help you. So Kinsey asks, is knowing JavaScript enough? I mean, it depends. It all depends. I mean, know C# and never have to write JavaScript. You might have front end devs or people who handle that for you. Depends on the team. I think if you know JavaScript, you'll end up learning all the frameworks, because that's what you really end up working with, is all the different frameworks like React or native, or pardon me, Angular and Vue.js and all that other stuff. Oh yeah, and W3 schools, that's another good one for learning. So really, it's going to be wherever your job takes you. And I think once you've been coding for a couple years, you're probably going to pick up another language, because you'll find something interesting that you want to do, and it's in another language. And so when you're learning that new language, what I would suggest, a good way to transition to learning a new language is convert something from the language you already know to the new language that you're learning, because you know what the end result is. So you already know the business rules, you know the end result, you know the objects, you know the logic, all of that. If you can translate that into the new language, it'll teach you a lot about the new language, but you're starting with something that's familiar to you. I want to get a job as soon as I complete my web dev course. However, I start college about 2 days after I complete the course. Is there any work you could do, with that, or at college? Well, you go look at like Fiverr. Have you looked at that? Like Fiverr. They're just like an odd job, like programming site. Like I have a project. I'll give you a few $100s to go do it. Go. So it's like moonlighting. So you could take a look at Fiverr. I think there's other sites that do that too. There used to be one called like IT Moonlighting or IT Moonlighter. They're out there. There's just these moonlighting sites, and they're not paying you a lot of money, but you get experience out of it. But in those cases, if you do any of those, this is true of any project, but especially one where there's not a lot of money involved. Be very clear in your specification. Like, write down everything and say, hey, this is what I think you're asking me to build. Is everything in here? Never make an assumption. Get it all written down and get them to sign it. And then you'll be in good shape. I think we'll be hiring soon, Melanie. You were asking, is our company hiring? So Klipsch. I know I'm going to be looking for a couple interns soon, and I have reached out to Pete about that. So I would say, submit, your name, and we could talk. And, when we're ready to pull the trigger on that, we'll see what we can make happen. And, same thing, for like internships and apprenticeships, just, start going to meetups, start meeting people. Yeah. And Devin, if you're looking for side work, going to meetups, you could ask that same question, and I'll bet there's people who have ideas and would love to give you work to do. And if they see you at a meetup, that might be good. You might want to, come to a meetup, like, ask that question a few weeks in, once people actually know you. But even like Code and Coffee, like there's Fisher's Code and Coffee. And then I think there's also an Indianapolis Code and Coffee. There might even be a Carmel Code and Coffee. It's just developers getting together. And oddly enough, we often don't talk about code at all. But you meet other developers in the area, and they're usually at least intermediate and above. And so everyone seems to welcome junior developers into that fold, because, I think, in Indiana, we're a very inclusive development community or developer community, and really want to build people up. Yeah. Do I give any mentoring for new developers? I'm happy to meet with any of you and listen and offer advice. Just let me know. I'll even buy my own coffee. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you want to do that, just message me. Just make sure that whatever your LinkedIn profile, it says something about you're a student at 1150 Academy or something, so I know to accept it. I just like auto accept those. What types of roles would you recommend we look for as beginning junior developers wanting to learn as much as possible and get practice? Probably I mean, it depends on your age. Yeah. So like internships and apprenticeships, I think are good. And then like if you're in your 30s and above, I think you could ask for being an intern, but you might need to look for a junior developer position. And that's just the reality of how people define things. But like, if you look at SCP, software engineering professionals, they're in Carmel, they have a whole internship program. Well, they'll bring you on board as a junior developer and walk you in and grow you. I believe Exact Target, well, now Salesforce, they have the same thing. And there's a number of companies that will intern you into being a better developer. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So having like the insight in the industry that you have, do you have any recommendations or advice on like how we should break into it as far as going in as an intern, going into like the corporate space, or you mentioned like freelance with Fiverr? Do you have any recommendation on kind of how to start that? What would be best?
I think it just depends on what you feel comfortable with. I think, if you're older, you already know kind of like the kinds of companies or people you'd like to work with or for. I think if you're younger, you might not have that same experience. It could be your first job. So, I would try something, like just look at everything that's out there, and if something catches your eye, realize that it's a stepping stone and you could grow with that company. But at the very least, you'll get experience that'll help build you. You might not stay with the company that long, but it's really up to you.
And then I did just have a follow-up question, not to put the cart before the horse, but kind of touched on it just now. I heard like in tech, it is good to switch switch jobs at least every 2 years or so with your salary, so it doesn't get stagnant, and that really helps kind of increase that. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday. I gotta go here in a few minutes. One, it is a red flag to me seeing someone who has a lot of 2-year entries on their resume. Like, I would have significant reservations, because you're either leaving a company for generally 2 reasons. 1, bad boss. 2, more money. Actually, it's in the opposite order. It could be bad culture, but whatever, fine. Bad boss / bad culture, or bad team / or money. If it's money, I'm not going to be able to do anything to help you. Like 2 years from now, if I didn't give you a raise, that was enough, you'd quit. Fuck that. I mean, that I gotta keep that in mind. And if I see you doing that often, I'm probably going to ask, so how come you were only at each of the places for 2 years, or a year and a half? If you need more money and you're valuable and you felt something wasn't, you weren't given the opportunity to really negotiate more money, and okay, to some extent, it's our fault, but you shouldn't quit to try getting more money. I mean, if money's the issue, then your job, you have no passion for our company. You just care about money, and money's important. It puts food on the table. But if you didn't negotiate effectively in the beginning, that's hard to fully blame on us, because no one's trying to chisel you into poverty. But at the same time, if you feel you need more money, but you wait till you're at point break, that's on you. I think you have to keep that communication channel open, that if there's financial pressure, you should bring it up, or financial changes you'd like to see made, you should bring that up to your manager. And people aren't going to fire you for asking for more money or bringing up the conversation. I mean, as long as you're tactful about it, right? Like, well, I'll leave if you don't give me more money. Well, then, okay, so you don't care about our product. It's only about money. Yeah. So be tactful, and I think you'll get what you want. Yes, it is a tactic to go and quit and get more money. Like, if I don't know. I'm forget about us, but you know, say, you know, like you're working somewhere, you're getting $40,000 a year, and someone else goes, you know what, I really want you working for me for $60,000 a year. I mean, I don't know that the company, you know, like your current employer would just double, you know, like add 50% to your salary, you know? I mean, it may be an impossible thing to do. So you may be forced to move for just the it's an obvious, like it's already a good fit, you know, like you really like that team and there's no way the company can match that kind of money. Okay, you know, I get that. But if those opportunities are coming all the time, I mean, really, you need to get better at negotiating. You know, because you're clearly valuable. I actually did work for a company once that people would quit in order to get the raise. And when I left, they asked me if I wanted a raise, and I said no. The fact that I've put in my 2 weeks is not me asking for more money. I've told you why I'm leaving. I've been unhappy for, you know, N number of months. You never did anything about it, so I'm leaving. But that's me. I think, you know, it just depends. Yeah, you know, in the beginning, like when you're young, I expect you're probably going to bounce around a bit. I mean, because you're young, you're getting your feet wet, you know, in the industry, you know, and as you get better, you're going to get more money and the offers are going to be better. So you probably will jump teams. And that, you know, I don't know if that's significant for junior and intermediate developers, but like senior developers, I would definitely have an issue with it because I wouldn't want you to end up leading a team and then leaving the team in a lurch when you found more money. And then there's the other side of it, which is culture and bad boss. Well, I mean, if your manager isn't someone you're compatible with and you haven't given, you know, you need to make sure you give them a chance to solve what your gripes are, because it could be you too. Yeah, I mean, conflict, there's usually blame on both sides. Give your teammate, your manager, etc., an opportunity to improve, and then move forward from there. But if you can't do that, or it's money, and it's just black and white money issue, you know, that's a decision you're going to have to make and accept the consequences of doing that too often. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. I kind of would love to hear your take on, like, because I feel like culturally we don't really talk about salary too much. It's kind of like frowned upon. And then I know with job listings, usually salary isn't really included. And it's kind of not fair to ask, you know, what that range would be for us, since everyone's going to be at a different place post-graduation, as far as skill set. But do you know what that would look like, or kind of, do you have any opinions on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, your salary, if you're asking, you know, what about salary? How do I negotiate that? I would just be upfront in the interview. You know, like if they're interested in you, you can say, hey, I'm sure that we'll come up with a salary, you know, or with compensation that we all find fair. And you could say, you can always ask, you know, what are the salary bands so that I know whether we're going to be in the right ballpark. I mean, it's an open-ended question, but it doesn't put pressure on anybody, especially if you're working for a larger company. What are the acceptable salary bands for the position that I'm hiring into, so that you don't have an idea in your head that's too high or too low. And then if they ask you, what kind of money are you looking for? You could counter with that question, or you can say, I'm sure that, you know, if we get to the final stages of this where you want to hire me, you know, we'll come up with something that is acceptable. You know, that's fair. And I have found that to work just fine. And if they're really pressuring you for a number, I mean, you could ask, so does that mean you want to hire me? Yeah. So, you know, what are the bands? You know, I mean, and you should know going into, you know, whatever the position is, what the going salary is, like in Indiana or whatever. And I gotta go here in a minute. I still left my dog outside. and I got a meeting at 11:30. But if you have follow-up questions, because that can be a longer question, salary negotiation. Although your leverage is pretty low because you're a junior developer, that doesn't mean you have no leverage.
Mhm.
I'm happy to talk with you about that offline. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Be fair. Be upfront and be honest and be fair. And I think you'll be happy with what you get. But, don't try to predict what their reaction is going to be. Just, know what you want, know the parameters that you're going to have to work with. And at that point, it's a negotiation. It doesn't matter that, what kind of negotiation, it's a negotiation. And if they want you and you want them, you'll find a way to work it out, hopefully. I'll take one last question, and then I gotta jump. If there are any more. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me today. If you have any questions, hit me up on LinkedIn. You can also email me. I'll put my email in here. Very hard to remember. It's arie@arie.net. I can give my Klipsch one, but it's arie.rahimzadeh@klipsch.com. Harder to remember. arie@arie.net, much easier to remember. And if you need anything or you have any more questions, just please don't hesitate to ask. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. I hope you learned a lot today.
Thank you so much. It was really good.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Take
Thank
care
you.
and have a wonderful day and a great weekend.
Thank you so much for your time.
Woohoo! You're welcome. I'll stop the recording.